So I'm going to look at the truth table I created to test this belief system to show you how these truth tables can reveal interesting things about larger philosophic questions for us, okay? So I began completing my truth table by assuming that F and R are true statements. I did that right here. So the personal freedom exists is indicated as true, and humans are responsible for their actions is regarded as true. And so my question to you would be this. Do you agree that the statement personal freedom exists is true? Do you think that's a true thing, a true statement? Okay. Now I recognize, sometimes somebody's incarcerated and they have significantly diminished freedom. And sometimes people are, brainwashed, or they're so deeply influenced by their culture that their decisions are not entirely their own. But what I'm asking you is, at a higher philosophic level, does the concept of free will actually exist? When I open my refrigerator door and I see a tangerine and a plum sitting there, and I think to myself, wow, I could have a tangerine or a plum or both. Is that really true? Or am I sort of determined to take one or both of those pieces of fruit by the physical workings of my brain, which is working the way that it is because of the physical laws of the universe? So do you believe that personal freedom is a thing that exists on some level? And if you say, yes, I think that it does, then I'm going to guess you probably also think that humans are responsible for their actions. You praise somebody when they do something good. You condemn somebody when they do something bad because you think to yourself, you didn't have to do that good thing, but you chose to do it anyway. Good for you. You didn't have to do that lousy thing, but you did it anyway. Bad on you, okay? So typically, believing that personal freedom exists entails that personal responsibility exists. But if you said that personal freedom doesn't exist, if you said, I think that statement is false, then I'm going to guess that you probably, although you're not required to, you probably also said humans are not responsible for their actions. Since they're not free to do other than what they did, how can you blame them for doing what they did? Or how can you praise them for doing what they did? They couldn't have done otherwise because personal freedom doesn't exist. Okay, so oftentimes, with the exception of one school of philosophy, these two things go hand in hand. Now, look at what the rest of our truth table reveals when we assume that personal freedom and personal responsibility are things that exist in reality. You'll notice that M is false everywhere. Okay, and M stands for the mind is identical to the brain. All right, so think about this for a second. Do you think that your brain is the only thing that exists that's associated with your personal identity? Or do you believe that your brain is this organ of gray noodles, but you have this sort of immaterial mind? Right? You have this non-material mind that allows you to make these choices freely without just being in service to the physical functioning of your brain, which is really just being operated on by the natural laws of the universe. Okay? There's a school of philosophy called identity theory. And identity theory says, you know what? We talk about minds and brains as if they're different things. We talk about well, in my mind, this is what's happening. But really, they say they're the same. They're identical. That's the identity theory part. And so when we claim to be having thoughts, or when we claim to be making decisions, we're just really offering kind of flowery ways of describing the neurochemical activity that's going on in our brains. And it's not actually real in the way that we think it is. Consciousness is this kind of illusion. Okay? But if you believe personal freedom exists, then you believe that there's some part of you that is not simply a puppet being worked by the physical laws of the universe. And that's why it's false when you believe that the mind is identical to the brain, because essentially you'd have to have some other aspect of your personality that's not enslaved to the physical laws of the universe. And that non-material, non-physical mind might be just that thing. And that's kind of what this truth table reveals, is that when you make these assumptions about personal freedom and responsibility, you also entail or imply another assumption about the existence of a mind that's independent or separate from the brain. All right? So if you find these kinds of questions interesting, you might think about taking Philosophy 10, Introduction to Philosophy, with me, where we talk about these and other super cool and interesting questions in lots of great detail.